Hey guys, tonight we take you back to a darker time. A time of dying empires, crumbling walls, and royal blood on marble floors. We're diving into what life was really like on the last day of the Byzantine Empire. Forget the romantic tales of noble crusades and glorious emperors Hollywood fed you. The truth is you probably wouldn't survive watching your entire world collapse in a single day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just been born into the last day of a 1,000-year empire. The good news? You're a princess. The bad news? It's May 28th, 1453, and tonight's your last night as Christian royalty. Your palace walls are so thick they muffle the sounds of war, but they can't stop the Turkish cannons or the smoke that's been drifting through your window for weeks. There's no Netflix to distract you, no Instagram to post your worries, and definitely no hotline to call for reinforcements. Just a prayer book that's getting thinner from desperate page turning and the growing certainty that tomorrow will bring the end of everything you've ever known. You wake not to the gentle chimes of the palace bells, but to the thunderous roar of Ottoman cannons. The ground trembles beneath your silken bedsheets. Through the narrow window of your chamber in the Porphyra Palace, the sky bleeds crimson, whether from sunrise or the fires still burning in the outer districts. You cannot tell. The sound comes again. Boom. The massive stone walls of Constantinople shudder. You feel it in your bones. This vibration that has become the rhythm of your sleepless nights. Your fingers trace the golden threads of your coverlet, each one a prayer woven by the women of Trebizond. Today, you know with a certainty that sits heavy in your chest, these threads will unravel. Your chambermaid, Maria, enters without announcement. Her eyes are rimmed red, not from sleep, but its absence. She carries a bronze basin filled with rose water, but the petals floating atop are brown at the edges, withered like all beautiful things in this besieged city. As she pours the water into the marble font carved with eagles and double-headed Orthodox crosses, you notice how her hands shake. The water splashes, creating ripples that catch the weak morning light. You are Anna Paleologina, 23 years old, daughter of Constantine XI, the last emperor of the last empire. Your bloodline stretches back through centuries of purple-born rulers to the very foundations of New Rome. Today, that bloodline ends. You continue. Rising from your bed, you feel the cold bite of marble against your bare feet. The floor is inlaid with porphyry and serpentine, stones that have witnessed the prayers of saints and emperors. Your nightgown, edged with gold thread, whispers against your skin as you walk to the window. The fabric was woven in the imperial workshops, where artisans spent months creating patterns that told the story of your dynasty. Birds of paradise, sacred monograms, the double-headed eagle of Byzantium. Outside, the great chain across the Golden Horn still holds. Its massive links, forged in the foundries of Pontus, stretch taut between two shores, preventing Turkish ships from entering the harbor. But you can see them. Dozens of Ottoman galleys drawn up on the Galata shore, their bronze rams gleaming like the teeth of beasts. Men move between them like ants, carrying powder and shot. Maria approaches with your mourning robe, a garment of deep purple silk that matches the color of your station. As she drapes it over your shoulders, you feel its weight, not just the fabric, but everything it represents. The purple dye came from murex shells gathered along the shores of Tyre, each shell yielding only drops of precious color. A single yard of this cloth costs more than a farmer earns in a lifetime. The robe's collar is stiff with pearls and emeralds, gems that once adorned the crown of Justinian the Great. They press against your neck like a reminder of every emperor who came before every victory, every loss, every decision that led to this moment. Your fingers find the small golden cross that hangs from a chain at your throat, a gift from your father on your 15th birthday, blessed by the patriarch himself. You move to the icon corner, where lampadasts burned before images of Christ Pantocrator and the Theotokos. The smell of myrrh and frankincense mingles with the acrid smoke drifting in from the city. Your knees touch the cold stone as you genuflect, and you begin the morning prayers your mother taught you before her death. Kyrie eleison, Christ eleison, Kyrie eleison. You continue. Maria holds up a bronze mirror, its surface polished to perfection. Your reflection stares back. High cheekbones, dark eyes that hold the depth of Anatolian lakes, skin pale from months of confinement. But it is not vanity that holds your gaze, it is the weight of history you see reflected there. In your face live the features of Helena Dragitzis, your mother, and through her, the bloodlines of Serbia's royal house. Your father's sharp jaw speaks of the Paleologui, that ancient family that has ruled Byzantium for 2 centuries. The mirror is old, older than you can imagine. Its copper was mined in Cyprus when the island still bore the purple banners of Rome. Craftsmen in the workshops of the Mesazon polished it for an empress whose name is now dust. How many Byzantine princesses have looked into this same reflection? How many have watched empires rise and fall in its depths? You take the silver comb Maria offers and begin to untangle your dark hair. Each strand holds the scent of Persian jasmine oil, a luxury that arrives in smaller quantities each month as the siege tightens. Your hair falls to your waist in waves, thick enough that it requires 2 women to braid properly. But today, there is only Maria, and she works with the careful efficiency born of practice and desperation. As she braids, you study the walls of your chamber. Mosaics cover every surface, not the crude paintings of Western churches, but thousands of tiny tesserae fitted together to create images that seem to breathe. The walls tell stories. The miracle at Cana, where water became wine, the presentation of Christ at the temple, the holy women at the sepulchre. Each face in the mosaics is unique, captured in eternal prayer or praise. You have memorized every expression, every fold in their garments. The braid is finished, coiled and pinned at the nape of your neck with silver clasps shaped like doves. Maria steps back, and you catch her expression in the mirror, a fleeting look of loss, as if she too understands what this grooming ritual means. It may be the last time these walls witness such ceremonies. You continue. The morning air carries strange perfumes through your window. The usual mixture of baking bread, incense, and sea salt is now tainted with something else. The smell of burning timber and, faintly, of death. Houses in the outer quarters burn without ceasing. The smoke rises in columns, blending with the mist from the Bosphorus until you cannot tell where grief ends and mourning begins. Maria leads you to the small table where your morning meal awaits. It is modest by the standards of your station, but rich compared to what the common folk have endured these past months. A cup of diluted wine, the good vintages from Lesbos are long gone, and a piece of bread made from barley and millet. There is a small portion of honey, crystallized and precious as amber, and a handful of dried dates that some enterprising merchant smuggled through the blockade. You eat slowly, savoring each bite not for pleasure, but for the weight it will give your body. Anna, you tell yourself, you must be strong. Your father depends on you. Your people, what remains of them, look to the imperial family for courage. You cannot let them see weakness. The bread is coarser than it was last year, and tougher than it was last month. The palace bakers mix sawdust with the flour now, though they do their best to hide it. Still, you have seen children in the streets with arms like twigs, and you know that even this rough bread is more than most will eat today. Maria hovers nearby, ready to attend any need. She has been with your family since before your birth, brought from Moria when she was little more than a child herself. Her own children died in the plague that ravaged the city 3 winters ago. Now she channels all her maternal care toward you, this last flower of the purple. From somewhere deep in the palace comes the sound of footsteps, soldiers by their rhythm. They echo through corridors that once rang with laughter and music, spaces now given over to war councils and desperate planning. You listen to their approach and retreat, timing the patterns. The palace has become a strange clock, marking time not by hours but by the movement of desperate men. You continue. A knock comes at your door, not Maria's gentle tap, but the firm, measured strikes of a soldier. Maria opens it to reveal Demetrios, one of your father's archons, still bearing the dust of the walls on his cloak. His armor bears fresh dents, and his left arm hangs stiffly at his side. Blood has been washed from a cut above his eye, but the wound still seeps. "Princess," he says, his voice cracked from shouting orders through the night. "His Majesty requests your presence in the crucible chamber. The patriarch has arrived." You nod, though your stomach tightens. The crucible chamber, the room where imperial decrees are sealed with golden seals, has become your father's command center. Maps cover the ancient marble table where once treaties were signed with proud kingdoms. Now those maps show the shrinking purple territories, marked with red ink to show where the Ottomans massed their forces. Maria brings your outdoor cloak, heavier than your chamber robes. This one is woven from wool dyed with kermes, the precious red extracted from insects found only in certain oak trees. The color is so deep it appears almost black in dim light, shifting to crimson when sunlight touches it. Golden cords secure it at your throat, their tassels weighted with tiny bells that chime softly as you move. As you prepare to leave, you pause before the icon of St. Helena, discoverer of the true cross. Her painted eyes seem to hold understanding. Another royal woman who faced the end of worlds. You cross yourself 3 times, the motion automatic after a lifetime of such gestures. "Mother of God, watch over us," you whisper in Greek, though the words feel small against the magnitude of what approaches. The corridor outside is dimmer than your chamber, lit by oil lamps that burn reluctantly in the thick air. Tapestries from the workshops of Constantinople hang along the walls, scenes of Christ's triumph, the Virgin's protection, the glory of the saints. But dust motes dance in the light, and you notice how the colors have faded. Even in the palace, entropy advances. You continue. The walk to the crucible chamber takes you through the heart of the great palace, a complex that has grown organically over 1,000 years. Each step carries you deeper into history. You pass the hall where your grandfather, Manuel II, once entertained the ambassadors of France and England, seeking aid that never came. Your silk slippers whisper against marble floors that have supported the feet of saints and sinners, conquerors and conquered. The walls display centuries of accumulated treasures. Here, a relief carved during the reign of Justinian, showing the recapture of Rome from barbarian hands. There, a mosaic created for Leo the Wise, depicting the Mother of God granting wisdom to earthly rulers. Ivory plaques from Egypt, silver vessels from Bulgaria, jeweled crosses from Georgia, all gathered here in the dying light of the last Christian empire. You pass the chamber where the crown jewels are kept. The great doors are sealed with wax and the emperor's seal, but you know what lies within. The stemma, the crown of hammered gold that weighs 8 pounds and holds emeralds the size of eggs, the sword of Justinian, whose blade is inscribed with verses from the Psalms, the purple buskins that only someone of imperial blood may wear. Will they burn with the palace, or will they be carried off as trophies to decorate some sultan's palace in Adrianople? Maria and Demetrios walk beside you, but your thoughts turn inward. You remember running through these same corridors as a child, playing hide-and-seek with your cousin Michael Tsekandiles. He died at the walls 3 days ago, his body consumed by one of the Sultan's great guns. His mother keened for 2 days before the patriarch insisted duty demanded silence. The air grows thicker as you approach the center of the palace. Smoke from braziers mingles with incense and the sweat of desperate men. You hear voices before you reach the chamber. Your father's bass rumble, the patriarch's measured tones, the staccato reports of various commanders. The language shifts between Greek and Latin, sometimes breaking into the vulgar tongue of the streets when emotion overwhelms protocol. You continue. The crucible chamber overwhelms your senses as you enter. A dozen oil lamps burn around a massive oak table that dominates the center of the room. Maps cover every inch of its surface, weighted down with daggers and broken pieces of armor. Red marks show Turkish positions. Blue marks indicate what remains of your defenses. The red greatly outnumbers the blue. Your father stands at the far end, his once magnificent frame now gaunt beneath purple robes that hang loose on his shoulders. Constantine XI Paleologis, last of his name, studies a report written on rough paper with a stub of charcoal. His beard, once carefully groomed, grows wild and streaked with premature gray. When he sees you, his face transforms briefly, not with a smile, but with something softer, more fragile. The patriarch Gennadius sits in a carved chair, his black robe making him seem like a living shadow. His face is sunken, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights spent in prayer. Before him lies an open gospel book, its illuminated pages catching the lamplight. Gold leaf flakes from the margins where anxious fingers have traced the words. He looks up as you approach, offering the blessing of his raised hand. Around the table stand the surviving members of your father's council. Lucas Noturus, the Megaduke, whose family controls what remains of the imperial navy, the brothers Bacchiardi. Genoese allies whose crossbowmen hold the sea wall, Cardinal Isidore, the Pope's representative, whose very presence here is a concession born of desperation. Each man bears the marks of siege warfare, bandaged wounds, clothes stained with blood and soot, faces carved deep with exhaustion. The room itself breathes history. The ceiling stretches high above, painted with stars and patterns that match the constellations visible on the night Constantinople was founded. The walls display imperial portraits going back 10 generations, stern-faced men and elegant women who ruled when the word Byzantine meant power that stretched from Venice to the Euphrates. You approach your father and drop into a deep curtsy, the gesture both ritual and genuine respect. His hand, when he raises you, trembles slightly, not from fear, you think, but from the weight of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. You continue. Your father gestures to a chair placed at his right hand, an honor that draws glances from the assembled nobles. As you sit, the silk of your gown rustles, a sound that seems unnaturally loud in this room dedicated to grim business. The wood of the chair is warm beneath you. Someone has been sitting there recently, though you cannot say who. Daughter, your father begins, his voice carrying the careful modulation that emperors learn from birth. We have received word from our spies within the Turkish camp. He lifts a scrap of parchment, its edges burned to obscure its origin. The Sultan prepares for a final assault. Perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow, but soon. The weight of this news settles over the room like a shroud. You have known it was coming. The increased cannon fire, the movement of troops visible from the palace towers, the desperate tenor of the nightly war councils. But knowing and hearing are different creatures entirely. Lucas Notaras leans forward, his scarred hands flat against the map. The land walls hold, majesty, but barely. The Turks have brought up their great gun, the one they call Basilica. Each stone ball it hurls weighs 600 pounds. The outer wall shows cracks near the Chrysius Gate. Your father nods grimly. The Chrysius Gate. You remember playing near it as a child, fascinated by the carvings of eagles and crosses that decorated its massive arch. Now those same carvings provide cover for defenders who pour boiling oil on attackers. Cardinal Isidore speaks up, his Latin-accented Greek precise despite the circumstances. The promised relief from your Catholic brothers has not materialized. Venice sends excuses instead of ships. Genoa plays both sides. The Pope's words are beautiful, but words do not stop cannonballs. A bitter laugh escapes from Giorgio's Fances, your father's most trusted advisor. His son died on the walls a week ago, crushed by a stone. Perhaps words are all we have left, he says. Words and prayer. The patriarch looks up from his gospel. The Lord tests us as he tested Job. Our faith must be stronger than their cannons. You continue. Your father's gaze finds you, and in it you read a mixture of love, pride, and terrible sorrow. Anna, he says, using the familiar form of your name reserved for family, you are the last daughter of our house. The blood of New Rome flows in your veins as purely as it flowed in those who founded this city. The men around the table exchange glances. They know what comes next, what must come next when empires die and royal lines face extinction. Your father continues, his voice growing stronger as duty overrides personal feeling. When the walls fall, you must be ready. I have spoken with the patriarch about arrangements. You understand without needing details. For a princess of the blood, there are limited options when the enemy stands at the gates. Marriage to a Turkish lord, perhaps, your royal blood used to legitimize new rulers. Conversion to Islam, trading your eternal soul for temporal safety. Or the alternative that many Byzantine nobles have already chosen. The quick mercy of a blade before dishonor can stain the purple. But something in you rebels against these choices. You are not merely another princess in a tapestry of conquest. You have studied statecraft with the empire's finest scholars, learned warfare from commanders who cut their teeth fighting Timur's hordes. Your mother, Helena Dragitzes, was no mere ornament. She held the Hexamillion passes against Murad's armies while your father fought in the Morea. I understand my duty. Father, you say, your voice carrying surprising strength. The words echo slightly in the stone chamber. But I would ask, if the walls fall, if all seems lost, might I not serve better on those walls than hidden in some chamber? A murmur runs through the assembled men. The idea of a woman, even a princess, taking up sword and shield is not entirely unknown. Your grandmother fought in the siege of Constantinople that broke the first Ottoman blockade. The legendary Caterina Sforza held Forli's walls against Cesare Borgia. But these are desperate times, and desperate times make strange bedfellows of tradition and necessity. You continue. The patriarch closes his gospel with a sound like a settling bird. His eyes, rheumy with age and smoke, fix on you with surprising intensity. If the princess wishes to take arms in defense of the faithful, is this not the same spirit that moved Joan of Arc? That guided Judith against Holofernes? Your father is quiet for a long moment, studying maps that show disasters or deliverance depending on how you read them. Finally, he nods slowly. Let it be as my daughter wishes. Demetrios, assign her a guard of our finest men. If she is to be on the walls, let her be protected as befits her station. The Archon bows deeply. It shall be done, Majesty. But the princess will need proper armor. Her court garments, however beautiful, offer little protection against Turkish steel. Then see to it, your father commands. He rises from his chair, the motion causing several maps to flutter to the floor. No one moves to retrieve them. What do maps matter when territory shrinks by the hour? We have an hour before the morning prayers. Use it to prepare whatever must be prepared. The men begin to file out, their conversation turning to logistics, artillery placement, the thousand deadly details that warfare demands. But the patriarch remains behind, as does your father. The old priest reaches into his robes and withdraws a small object wrapped in silk. This belonged to your great-grandmother, Helena Kanakazinos, he says, unwrapping it carefully. In his weathered hands lies a golden locket, shaped like a double-headed eagle with tiny rubies for eyes. Inside is a fragment of the true cross, blessed by 3 patriarchs. It has protected the women of your line through 6 sieges. He places it in your hands, and you feel its weight, not just the gold, but the prayers of generations. Your fingers trace the intricate work of the goldsmiths, every feather on the eagle's wings picked out in miniature detail. This is not merely jewelry, it is a tangible connection to every woman who has worn purple, who has faced the end of worlds with dignity intact. You continue. Walking through the palace to the armory, you notice details previously overlooked. Here, a crack in the marble where cannon vibrations have shaken the foundation. There, a tapestry hastily patched where falling plaster tore it. The very building seems to know its time grows short. The armory occupies a vaulted chamber beneath the palace's main hall. Oil lamps bracket the walls, their flames dancing over displays of weapons accumulated across centuries. You see swords whose hilts are worn smooth by generations of hands, spear points that gleamed at Manzikert, crossbow bolts fletched with eagle feathers from the Taurus Mountains. Theodoros the Armorer, a grizzled man whose family has served yours for 4 generations, looks up from a workbench where he repairs mail shirts. His hands, scarred from years of working hot metal, pause in their weaving of iron rings. When he sees you, his eyes widen before he drops to one knee. "Princess," he says, rising at your gesture. "I have been expecting you." He moves to a wall where several suits of armor hang on wooden stands. "Your grandfather had these made for your grandmother, sized for a woman's frame, but lacking nothing in protection. The armor is magnificent, not the crude plate worn by common soldiers, but masterwork that represents hundreds of hours of skilled labor. The breastplate is decorated with the double-headed eagle of Byzantium, enameled in purple and gold. The arms and legs are articulated with dozens of small plates that will allow movement while deflecting blows. The weight? You ask, already knowing it will be significant. 30 pounds, princess. Less than a man's armor, but still considerable. But see, he lifts the breastplate, showing you the interior. Every joint is perfectly balanced. The padding is silk, not leather, to avoid chafing. The helmet. He lifts it reverently, made to accommodate your hair, with ventilation ports that will not compromise protection. You extend your hand, and he places the helmet in it. The metal is cool, polished to a mirror finish. Through the visor's slit, the world takes on a different perspective, narrower, more focused. You imagine looking through this opening as Turkish soldiers climb toward you on scaling ladders. You continue. The process of armoring is a ritual older than most kingdoms. Maria and Theodoros work together, their movements practiced despite this being your first time in war gear. You stand with arms outstretched as they fit each piece, cinching buckles and adjusting straps until the metal becomes like a second skin. First comes the arming doublet, quilted silk that will prevent the armor from chafing your skin raw. Then the greaves for your legs, the sabatons for your feet, each piece clicking into place with satisfying precision. The weight builds gradually, settling onto your frame in ways both foreign and strangely right. The breastplate requires 3 people to secure properly. As Maria tightens the side buckles, you feel your ribs compress slightly. The armor is snug by design, to prevent sections from shifting in combat. The eagle across your chest seems to spread its wings as the metal conforms to your torso. The arms, princess. Theodoros lifts the rear braces and vambraces, the upper and lower arm pieces. These are perhaps the most complex parts, with multiple joints that must align perfectly or restrict movement. As they're fitted, you flex your arms, marveling at how the steel plates slide against each other without binding. The gorget comes next, protecting your neck. It forces you to hold your head high, perhaps not by accident. The final piece is the helmet, which Maria lifts with both hands. As it settles over your head, The world narrows but does not disappear. The eye slits allow surprisingly good vision, and the breathing holes beneath mean you won't suffocate under stress. You take a step, then another. The armor moves with you, no longer foreign but becoming part of you. In the polished surface of a shield leaning against the wall, you see your reflection, no longer Anna the princess, but something else. Something harder. Something ready. You continue. With armor secured, Theodoros leads you to the weapon racks. Your grandfather favored the long sword, he explains, drawing a blade whose steel catches the lamplight. But for the walls, you'll want something more versatile. He selects a shorter sword, its blade 3 feet long, perfectly balanced. The grip fits your hand as if made for it, which, you realize, it may have been. Spada, he says. Good for close quarters, light enough for overhead work, heavy enough to punch through mail. You take a few experimental swings, feeling how the weight of the blade extends your arm's reach. The steel sings softly through the air. Muscle memory from years of courtly sword dancing adapts to this more serious purpose. And this, from a rack of shields, he selects a medium-sized piece, round with a pointed boss in the center. Its face bears the imperial eagle in gold and purple enamel. Buckler style. Won't tire your arm too quickly, but large enough to matter in a melee. The straps fit over your left forearm, the shield's weight distributed evenly. You practice the basic positions taught by your swordmaster in more peaceful times. Ward, hanging guard, fool's guard. Simple names for complex realities. Maria appears with a final touch, a purple sash to go over your armor. It's silk embroidered with prayers in gold thread, not merely decorative, but functional. In the chaos of battle, friend and foe blur together. The sash will mark you as imperial, rally your forces, make you a target for enemy commanders who seek the glory of killing royalty. You are the panoply of empire, Theodoros says solemnly. May it protect you as it protected your forebears. But you both know that armor's best protection isn't steel, it's the courage of the one wearing it. You continue. Before joining the defenders, custom demands one final ritual. You walk to the palace chapel, your armored footsteps echoing down corridors where the sound of metal has become commonplace. The chapel is small, built into an alcove that catches the morning sun through windows of colored glass. The patriarch waits at the altar, having somehow arrived before you despite his advanced age. Behind him hangs an icon of Christ Pantocrator, Christ the ruler of all, whose eyes seem to follow you as you approach. This icon is ancient, painted before the West and East split over theological differences, before the Crusaders sacked the city, before the Ottomans first crossed into Europe. Kneeling before the altar, you feel the weight of armor and tradition pressing down together. The patriarch places his hands on your helmeted head, his voice rising in the familiar cadences of ancient Greek. Lord God of hosts, who armed David against Goliath, who strengthened Joan against the English, who blessed Constantine with the sign of victory. His blessing mingles with the scent of incense and the sound of distant cannons. Other voices join in. Maria, Theodoros, several guards who have followed you here. The stone walls absorb and reflect the prayers, creating a harmony that seems to rise beyond the reach of earthly weapons. You rise, make the sign of the cross, and kiss the icon's frame. The paint is old, cracked with age, but the eyes within still burn with divine fire. If this is your last time in this chapel, let it be a moment worthy of remembrance. As you turn to leave, the patriarch presses something into your palm, a small silver cross on a chain. For inside your helmet, he explains, a reminder that earthly battles are mere shadows of cosmic ones. The chapel doors open, admitting morning light that seems almost harsh after the gentle glow of icon lamps. Outside waits duty, honor, and quite possibly death. but also the chance to prove that the purple you wear represents more than mere cloth, that it stands for something worth defending until the last breath. You continue. At the chapel's entrance, your father waits. He has donned his own armor, battered plate that has seen 3 campaigns, its surface scarred but still sound. The sight of him brings memories flooding back. You, 5 years old, watching him return from campaign against the Turks, his armor muddy but his banner still flying. Now your roles have shifted and you stand as warrior peers. He examines your equipment with the eye of a veteran commander. The strapping seems secure. The weight. Manageable, father. And it is, though you suspect that will change after hours of wearing it. Your body is already beginning to adapt, finding new ways to carry the load. Good. He pauses, and for a moment the emperor fades, leaving only a father facing the possible death of his child. Anna. His voice catches slightly. Your mother would be proud. She always said you had her will within Constantine's body. The mention of your mother brings its own weight. Helena Dragitzis, who held the Hexamillion while pregnant with you, who negotiated treaties when your father fought in Italy, who died of fever while you were too young to understand mortality's finality. Will you meet her today? The question hangs in the morning air. Where would you have me go? You ask. The time for farewells has passed, only duty remains. Your father consults with Demetrios, who produces a map marked with colored threads. The seawall section near the Silver Gate, he decides. It's lower than the land walls, more vulnerable. The Genoese hold it, but they're stretched thin. Your presence there will hearten them, and if... He doesn't finish the sentence, but you understand. If the walls are breached, that section offers routes to the harbor, to boats, to whatever comes after the end. A horn sounds in the distance. Not the musical notes that once called courtiers to feast, but the harsh bray of war. The sound bounces off palace walls, mingles with barking dogs and shouting voices. The city prepares for what may be its final day. You continue. Your escort forms up as you leave the palace complex. 20 men handpicked by Demetrios, their armor mismatched, but well-maintained. They carry a mixture of weapons, swords and spears, crossbows and primitive hand cannons. Some wear the purple and gold of the Imperial Guard, others bear the colors of mercenary companies that have remained loyal despite offers from the Turkish camp. Leading them is Flavius Cantacuzzinos, a distant cousin whose family lost their lands to Turkish raids 2 decades ago. His weapon of choice is a 2-handed sword as tall as himself, its blade inscribed with prayers in Gothic script. He nods respectfully as you emerge, falling into step beside you. The journey through Constantinople's streets reveals a city transformed by siege. Houses near the walls stand empty, their wooden shutters hanging loose like half-closed eyelids. Closer to the center, residents peer from behind barricaded windows. Children who should be playing in the streets instead help their parents prepare for the worst, burying valuables, filling buckets with sand to fight fires, sharpening kitchen knives for desperate defense. You pass the Hagia Sophia, the great church that has defined the city's skyline for 900 years. Its dome catches the morning sun, golden against blue sky. Through open doors, you hear the sound of continuous prayer, monks and citizens taking turns before the altar, maintaining an unbroken chain of supplication that has lasted weeks. A group of civilian defenders works to strengthen a barricade of overturned carts and furniture. They stop when they see you, some kneeling, others simply staring. A woman holds up her infant, a seeking a blessing, or perhaps merely wanting her child to see a princess in armor, something to remember if memory has value in whatever comes next. Your procession winds through neighborhoods that represent 1,000 years of accumulated life. The Venetian Quarter with its Western-style mansions, the Jewish section where scholars still debate the Talmud despite everything. The Armenian Quarter where stonecutters and silversmiths have maintained their crafts through multiple conquests. Each section tells part of Constantinople's story, Each adds to the weight of what stands to be lost. This is not merely a city under siege. It is the last keeper of Rome's flame, the final bridge between ancient and modern worlds. You continue. The approach to the sea wall brings new sounds and smells. The salt tang of the Bosphorus mingles with less pleasant odors. Pitch from fire ships moored as defensive barriers. The smell of Greek fire being prepared in earthen pots. The accumulated waste of an army forced into increasingly smaller spaces. The wall itself rises before you, lower than the great land fortifications, but still impressive. Built of alternating bands of stone and brick, it shows the patched scars of previous attacks. Turkish cannons have worried at its base, but the foundations go deep into the rock of the shoreline. Genoese crossbowmen occupy positions along the ramparts, their quarrels stacked in neat piles beside them. These are professionals, men who fight for gold rather than faith, but they fight nonetheless. Their captain, Paolo Bacchiardi, descends from the wall's walkway to meet you. "Princess," he says in accented Greek, removing his helmet to reveal graying hair and a face mapped with scars. "An honor. My men will fight harder knowing you're among them." The cynicism in his voice suggests he knows how empty such assurances are, but he maintains the courtesies. Leadership, you're learning, is often a performance for others' benefit as much as your own conviction. You climb the stone steps to the wall's top, armor clanking with each rise. The effort is already noticeable. Your breathing comes heavier than usual, the weight pulling at shoulders that will ache by day's end. But you climb steadily, maintaining the dignity expected of your station. From the ramparts, the view transforms your understanding of the siege. The Turkish camp spreads like a vast city across the hills of Anatolia, their white tents stretching beyond sight. Ships crowd the Bosphorus, galleys with bronze rams, transports loaded with men and supplies. The massive pontoon bridge the Sultan has built to move forces between shores. But closer, more immediately threatening, are the siege works. Trenches zigzag toward the wall, their approaches marked by fascines, bundles of sticks providing cover for advancing soldiers. Canvas screens hide the construction of more intricate devices, towers that will overtop the wall, catapults that hurl more than stone. A crossbowman points to movement in the nearest approach. "They've been working all night, Princess. Come full light, they'll make their play." You follow his indication and see them, figures crouched behind wooden shields, inching forward with each distraction. Soon they'll be close enough to throw grappling hooks, to raise ladders, to die against these stones in numbers that mean nothing to the ones sending them. The sun climbs higher, painting the scene in deceptively peaceful colors. Golden light on white tents, blue water lapping against blood-soaked hulls. War, you realize, can be beautiful from a distance. It's only close up that its true nature shows. You continue. A lull settles over the wall, not silence, but a reduction in intensity that feels like stillness after the night's alarms. Soldiers use the pause to check equipment, share water from skins that taste of leather and desperation, speak quiet prayers to whatever gods they trust with their souls. You walk the rampart, stopping to speak with defenders. A boy from Trebizond, no more than 16, clutches a spear taller than himself. "Have you family there?" You ask gently. "Had, Princess. The Turks came last year." His voice holds carefully controlled grief. "My mother sent me here before the end." How many such stories could you hear walking these walls? How many personal tragedies accumulate into the larger disaster unfolding around you? The mathematics of empire are written in individual tears. Further along, a grizzled veteran shows you his crossbow, a weapon so old its stock bears carving marks from previous sieges. "This here," he points to a notch near the trigger, "that's from when we held against Murad II. And this," another mark, the Genoese raid of 34. His crossbow is a chronometer of conflict, each scar a moment when the wall held. Will today add new marks? Or will the weapon end its service under Turkish feet? Maria appears at your elbow. She has followed you despite orders to remain in the palace. Princess, she says quietly, you should eat. The day will be long. She produces bread and cheese from beneath her cloak. It's poor fare, the bread more sawdust than grain, the cheese hard and nearly flavorless. But you eat gratefully, recognizing hunger you hadn't noticed until now. As you chew, you watch Turkish preparations across the narrows. Men move with purpose between the siege engines, officers on horseback riding between positions. Everything about their movement speaks of coordination, planning, overwhelming force soon to be unleashed. You continue. The first sign comes as movement in the Turkish trenches, not random activity, but the coordinated advance of men with purpose. Flags wave along their lines, passing signals from section to section. Drums begin beating in a rhythm that speaks of marching feet and climbing hands. They're coming, whispers a Genoese soldier unnecessarily. Everyone can see it, sense it. The morning's uneasy peace breaks like thin ice over deep water. Officers shout orders along your section of wall. Crossbowmen string their weapons with fresh cords. Cauldrons of oil, heated by charcoal fires kept burning through the night, begin to bubble and spit. Someone checks the mechanism on a mangle, its arm tensioned and ready to hurl jars of Greek fire. You draw your sword, its weight familiar now after hours of carrying it. The steel rings softly as it clears the scabbard. Around you, the wall comes alive with the sound of weapons being readied, the metallic whisper of arrows being knocked, the creak of bowstaves bending, the rustle of mail as men settle into fighting positions. Flavius Canzinos appears beside you, his great sword bare and gleaming. First or last? He asks quietly. You understand the reference. First to the walls in assault means courage, but likely death. Last off them in retreat means survival, but dishonor. Neither option appeals, but the time for alternatives has passed. Wherever we're needed most, you reply. He grins, a fierce expression that transforms his scarred face. Spoken like a daughter of Constantine. The Turkish drums grow louder, joined by fifes and cymbals. Their music is alien to your ears, pentatonic scales that shift and weave like smoke. Behind the music comes a newer sound, the rumble of cannon being wheeled into position. The great siege guns that have battered the land walls for weeks now turn their attention to your section. You continue. The first cannonball screams overhead like a living thing, its passage marked by a trail of smoke and spinning masonry chips. It strikes the wall 30 yards to your left, sending up a geyser of pulverized stone. The impact travels through the ancient foundations, reaching your feet as a tremor that speaks of destruction long planned and carefully executed. More shots follow in rapid succession, not the slow, measured bombardment of the past weeks, but a concentrated barrage intended to clear the ramparts for assault. You understand now why the Turkish preparations seem so elaborate. This is not merely another probe, another test of defenses. This is the attack they've been building towards since first investing the city. Down, Flavius shouts, pulling you behind a merlin as a cannonball shrieks past where your head had been. The stone crenellation explodes in fragments, one piece slicing across your cheek just below the helmet's rim. You taste blood, salt against fear. The defenders return fire as they can. Crossbow bolts arc toward the Turkish trenches, some finding targets among the advancing soldiers. A mangle sends a jar of Greek fire spinning through the air. It shatters against a wooden shield, spreading burning petroleum that briefly illuminates screaming figures. But for every Turkish soldier that falls, 10 more seem to take his place. They advance in waves now, some carrying scaling ladders, others wielding shields to protect the ladder bearers. Behind them come men with grappling hooks, and others still with picks and bars to pry at the wall's ancient mortar. A trumpet sounds from the palace. not a call to charge, but the prearranged signal for all defend. Heirs to take positions. Across the city, men and women are climbing to the walls, preparing for what many know will be their last act in a long story that began when Constantine the Great decided to build a new Rome. You continue. The first ladder strikes your section of wall with a crash that sends vibrations through the stone. Within moments, Turkish soldiers swarm upward, their curved sabers glinting in the morning sun. You lean out, despite Flavius's protective hand on your arm, and see their faces, young men, many of them, driven by faith or fear or the promise of plunder. An arrow winds past, so close you feel its fletching brush your helmet. The crossbowman beside you returns fire, his bolt taking a ladder climber in the chest. The man falls backward, bowling over those below him, but the ladder remains and others quickly replace the fallen. Oil. Someone shouts. A cauldron tips, sending boiling oil cascading down the wall's face. The stuff burns hotter than water, sticking to whatever it touches. Turkish soldiers caught in its path scream, sounds that cut through the broader chaos like knives through silk. You raise your shield as more arrows rattle against the rampart. One punches through the wooden planking of a door and quivers there, its point gleaming with some dark substance. Poison, perhaps, or simply the accumulated filth of campaign life. A Genoese crossbowman falls backward, clutching his throat where an arrow has found its mark. His weapon clatters across the stones, and you automatically step forward to take his place at the wall. The crossbow is heavy, its stock slick with sweat and blood, but you've practiced with such weapons in the palace courtyard during better days. Loading proves more difficult than expected. Your armored fingers fumble with the windlass, the mechanism designed for stronger hands than yours. But you persist, finally hearing the satisfying click as the string locks into place. A quarrel goes into the groove, a steel point designed to punch through mail, its veins cut from goose feathers that might once have filled pillows in distant lands. You continue. A grappling hook sails over the rampart, its iron claws scrabbling for purchase on the stone. You grab your sword and hack at the rope with desperate strokes. The hemp parts, sending the hook tumbling back to the foot of the wall, but immediately another takes its place. The Turkish assault has found its rhythm now, a deadly percussion of arrows, grapples, and climbing men. They come in waves, each surge testing a different section of the wall. Where one assault falls back, another immediately takes its place. This is warfare as practiced by an empire with unlimited manpower, treating soldiers like arrow shafts, useful until broken, then easily replaced. A section of crenellation disintegrates under cannon fire, showering defenders with stinging fragments. Through the gap, you glimpse Turkish banners, green silk emblazoned with crescents and Quranic verses. The Sultan's own standard flies among them, a reminder that this is no mere adventuring expedition, but the full weight of Ottoman power brought to bear. Paolo Bacchiardi stumbles past, clutching a wounded arm. Blood seeps between his fingers, but he still carries his crossbow and a quiver half full of quarrels. They're on the wall. He gasps, pointing toward the eastern end of your section. You look and your heart lurches. Turkish soldiers have indeed gained the rampart, their curved swords bright with purpose. They advance along the walkway, cutting down defenders who can't retreat quickly enough. Some of your men cluster together, forming a desperate knot of resistance, but they're being pushed steadily backward. With me, you call, though your voice seems thin against the sound of battle. You start toward the breakthrough, sword ready, shield high. Flavius appears at your side, his great blade already bloody to the hilt. As you move, you catch sight of your reflection in the polished boss of a fallen soldier's shield. The face looking back is streaked with soot and blood, framed by the practical curves of a war helmet. This is not the princess who woke this morning in silken comfort. This is something new, or perhaps something very old, awakened by necessity. You continue. The melee on the rampart dissolves into individual fights, each man's world shrinking to the reach of his weapon. You find yourself facing a Turkish warrior whose eyes blaze with fanatical fervor. His scimitar moves in patterns you've never seen, circular cuts that seem to target multiple points at once. Your own blade work, learned in the palace's practice yards, feels suddenly inadequate. The forms your master taught were elegant, designed to showcase noble grace. This is different, crude, practical, deadly. You barely get your shield up in time to catch a cut that would have opened your neck. The impact numbs your arm. The Turk presses forward, raining blows that ring against your shield's rim. You give ground, your feet seeking purchase on stones slick with blood and worse things. Behind you, the walkway's edge approaches. Fall here, and any hope of controlled descent vanishes. Desperation lends strength. As the Turk raises his sword for what might be the killing blow, you lunge forward with your shield's pointed boss. The bronze pyramid punches into his midsection, doubling him over. Your sword follows, taking him in the neck where his mail coat ends. Blood spatters your visor, warm and immediate. The man falls, his eyes already glazing, and you step over his body to engage the next attacker. No time for triumph, no moment for revulsion. The tide of battle allows neither luxury. More ladders strike the wall. More grappling hooks fly overhead. The Turkish assault seems endless, fed by the vast camps spread across the hills. How many men can the Sultan spend in this effort? How many lives does empire cost when reckoned in conquest rather than construction? You continue. In a brief lull, as both sides catch their breath, a voice rings out across the battlefield, not in Greek or Turkish, but in Arabic, the language of the Quran. You recognize the cadence, if not the words. Verses about holy war, about the faithful striking down the enemies of Allah, about paradise awaiting those who die in battle. The voice belongs to a man in the van of the Turkish attack, distinguished by green robes worn over mail. An imam, a holy man whose presence transforms this assault from mere military necessity into religious obligation. He raises his hands toward heaven, and the Turkish soldiers around him take up his chant. Your own side responds with different prayers. Someone begins the Trisagion, the threefold holy that has been sung in Greek churches for over 1,000 years. Holy God, holy mighty, holy immortal, have mercy on us. Other voices join in, creating a counterpoint to the Islamic prayers. Two faiths face each other across a narrow strip of stone, each convinced of its righteousness, each prepared to water the ground with blood to prove divine favor. You wonder, in a moment of clarity that cuts through the chaos, what God thinks of such proof. Does heaven truly favor those who kill in the right name? A crossbow bolt sprouts from the imam's chest. He looks down in surprise, as if unable to believe that prayer alone wasn't sufficient armor. He falls forward, his green robes spreading like lily petals in a pool of blood. But immediately another voice takes up the chant, then another. Faith proves more resilient than flesh. The brief theological debate ends as more ladders strike the wall. A Turkish soldier, perhaps sons or student of the fallen imam, climbs with particular fury. His eyes seek you out. The purple sash marks you as a target worth taking. Religious war has become personal. You continue. Your armor, which felt manageable in the palace courtyard, now presses against you like iron chains. The sun climbs higher, and beneath the metal you sweat until your undergarments cling like a second skin. Each movement costs extra effort. Each parry sends jolts of pain through shoulders unaccustomed to such abuse. But you fight on, because stopping means dying. The thought of your father reinforces your determination. Constantine XI, somewhere on the land walls, probably facing his own desperate moments. If he can endure, so can you. The blood of emperors isn't water it doesn't thin at the first test. A cry goes up from further along the wall. The Genoese section is being overrun. You see their distinctive crossbows being thrown down as their bearers flee or fall. Turkish soldiers pour through the gap like water through a broken dam, their weapons already bloody with Genoese blood. Fall back to the second line. Paolo shouts, though his voice is nearly lost in the din. The second line, hastily constructed barricades in the street behind the wall. It was always understood that the sea wall might not hold. Plans within plans, retreats within retreats, each position sacrificed to buy time for the next. You help carry a wounded crossbowman, his leg shattered by a cannonball fragment. He's surprisingly light, the vigor leached from him by blood loss and shock. As you half carry, half drag him toward the stairs, you realize you're leaving bloody handprints on his jerkin. When did you get wounded? The mixture of others' blood and your own has become too complex to parse. The retreat becomes a rout as more sections of wall fall. Men stumble down the stone steps, some carrying wounded comrades, others fleeing in simple panic. Officers try to maintain order, but their voices are small against the tide of defeat. You continue. The street behind the sea wall has been prepared for this moment. Overturned carts create a maze of obstacles, their wheels splintered for maximum obstruction. Windows have been blocked with stones and timber, turning houses into tiny fortresses. Citizens who couldn't fight on the walls now appear in doorways, holding whatever weapons they could find: kitchen knives, hammers, broken bottles with killing edges. You take position behind a wagon loaded with rubble, its wooden sides already splintered by arrow strikes from previous attacks. Your breath comes in short gasps, and you're grateful for the moment's respite. Maria appears beside you. Impossible woman, she somehow materialized in the chaos with a water skin and strips of cloth. For your wounds, she says, examining cuts you hadn't noticed until now. The water stings as she dabs at them, mixing with sweat and grime to create pink rivulets down your cheek. Over the barricade, Turkish soldiers flowed down the wall's inner face like ants from a disturbed nest. They've brought their own ropes and grapples to speed the descent. The first of them are already forming up in the street, their officers organizing them into attack columns. We won't hold here long, Flavius observes, wiping his sword clean on a dead man's cloak. The blade shows chips along its edge, each nick representing a life taken or nearly lost. You know he's right. This position was never meant to hold indefinitely, just long enough for word to reach the palace, for reinforcements to arrive, for miracles to manifest. But miracles seem in short supply this morning. The Turkish advance begins again, more cautious now that they fight in streets rather than storming walls. They use the bodies of their own dead as shields, advancing behind corpses that still bleed into the cobblestones. War transforms everything, even the dead, into resources. You continue. The midday sun beats down mercilessly, turning armor into ovens and making every breath feel thick and insufficient. In the street fighting, advantages shift constantly. The Turks have numbers, but the defenders know every alley, every door that might hide archers or desperately wielded blades. A Turkish officer, his robes marking him as a man of importance, directs his men from behind an overthrown cart. You watch him through an arrow loop hastily knocked in a wall, noting how he gestures and where his subordinates cluster. Killing him might disrupt their coordination by precious minutes for the next fallback position. You signal to the Genoese crossbowman beside you, pointing out the target. He nods understanding, cranking his weapons windlass with movements made quick by desperation. The quarrel loads with a satisfying click. The shot takes the officer in the shoulder rather than the chest. Not perfect, but sufficient. He spins and falls, his planning interrupted by the immediate reality of his own mortality. Turkish soldiers rush to aid him, their formation momentarily disrupted. Now, you call, and the defenders surge from cover. It's a brief, brutal exchange in the middle of the street. Steel rings against steel, Men grunt and curse in half a dozen languages, and blood makes the cobblestones treacherous. You find yourself against a Turkish soldier whose gear marks him as veteran. His sword bears nicks from previous battles, and his eyes hold the cold calculation of a man who kills for living. The exchange is brief. 3 quick passes, a desperate bind, and your blade finds the gap between his mail and helmet. As he falls, you see your own reflection in his blood-slicked sword. The face looking back has aged years in the past few hours. Purple cloth and royal blood mean little when death holds the accounting books. You continue. A horn sounds from the palace direction, not the brazen note of rally, but the silver call that means imperial messages. Through the chaos, a mounted figure approaches at gallop, his horse lathered and blowing. He wears the purple of your father's personal messengers, though his colors are dulled with dust and darker stains. He reins up near your position, the horse wild-eyed and trembling. Princess, the Emperor commands your immediate return to the palace. The message cuts through combat noise like a bell's pure tone. Around you, fighting continues. Men die while words travel, but the battle suddenly feels different. Your father has need of you elsewhere. What has happened beyond these streets? The land walls. You ask, holding, but barely. The great gate is breached. Turkish soldiers fight in the outer courtyard. His voice cracks slightly, a young man pushed beyond endurance by the weight of carrying desperate news. You look at the barricade, at the men crouched behind overturned carts and bleeding onto cobblestones. Your presence here matters, not strategically, perhaps, but for morale. The princess in armor, sharing danger with common soldiers, is worth more than her sword arm alone. But emperors don't send for their daughters lightly, especially not in the midst of siege. Something crucial has shifted in the larger pattern of the battle. Flavius makes the decision for you. Go, he says simply. We'll hold until we can't, then fall back to the next line. Your war isn't here anymore. It's wherever your father needs you. The messenger adds urgency with his next words. The patriarch waits with his majesty. They speak of final preparations. Final preparations. The weight of those words settles like stone in your chest. Perhaps the end comes faster than anyone calculated. Perhaps this really is the last day of the last empire. You continue. The journey back toward the palace reveals a city transformed. Streets that were ordered this morning now writhe with chaos. Civilian families flee eastward, carrying bundles that represent lifetimes of accumulation. Soldiers move against this tide, reinforcements heading toward whichever wall needs them most. Smoke rises from multiple districts, some from Turkish fire arrows, others from defenders burning supplies that shouldn't fall into enemy hands. The great library smolders, 1,000 years of accumulated wisdom feeding ordinary flames. You wonder how many irreplaceable manuscripts curl into ash while emperors and sultans decide whose god deserves a crown. Your horse, borrowed from a fleeing courier, stumbles over debris but pushes onward. The animal's flanks leave foam on your armored legs. How many horses will die today? How many animals drafted into mankind's wars understand their necessity in causes they cannot comprehend? Near the hippodrome, a group of citizens throws precious objects into a hastily dug pit. Gold vessels, silver crosses, jeweled vestments. The accumulated wealth of Byzantine nobility going into the earth rather than Turkish hands. An old woman weeps as she lowers what might be a family heirloom. Its beauty meaningless now except as one more thing denied to the conquerors. A priest appears in your path, blessing all who pass. His words come in rapid Greek, decades of ecclesiastical Latin mixing with vernacular prayers. He makes the sign of the cross over you as you pass, his hand shaking either from age or fear. Kyrie eleison, he calls after you. Lord, have mercy. The palace walls rise ahead, their ancient strength now seeming more like desperate hope than actual protection. Guards at the gate recognize you instantly, waving you through without challenge. In their eyes, you read the same knowledge that sits in your own chest. This might be the last time these gates open for anyone. You continue. The crucible chamber has been transformed. Maps cover the walls now, held in place by daggers thrust between stones. Red markers show Turkish advances, blue marks indicate defensive positions. The red spreads like wine stains across the parchment, blues shrinking to isolated islands in an approaching flood. Your father stands at the center, no longer the composed ruler of this morning. His armor bears fresh dents, and blood streaks his sword arm. When he looks up at your entrance, exhaustion briefly overwhelms the imperial mask he wears for others. Anna, the relief in his voice tells you more than any tactical report. Thank God. The sea wall? Lost, father. We fell back to the second line, but it won't hold long. You deliver the news cleanly, without emotion. There's no time for feelings now. The patriarch sits in his usual chair, but his posture has changed. His hands, which usually gesture eloquently during benedictions, now clutch the arms of his seat. Before him lies an open gospel, its pages turned to revelations, the end of all things. Other figures cluster around the table. Lucas Notaris, whose face bears a fresh scar, several of the remaining archons of blood-spattered messenger who arrive just before you. The cardinal seems to have vanished, fled, perhaps, or dead. In crisis, allegiances simplify rapidly. The land walls still hold. Your father continues, his voice carrying the hollow ring of hope maintained through will alone. But barely. The Turks have brought up siege towers, undermined 2 sections. It's a matter of hours now, not days. Hours. The word hangs in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Everything you've known, everything your family has built and protected and embodied, measured now in the time it takes the sun to cross a small portion of sky. You continue. Your father lifts an object from the table, the stemma, the imperial crown of Byzantium. Its gold catches lamplight, the gems embedded in its surface throwing tiny rainbows across the map-covered walls. This is not the everyday crown worn for court ceremonies, but the ancient diadem used for coronations, its weight symbolic as much as literal. Anna, he says, holding it out, I want you to understand what this represents. Not just authority, but responsibility. Not just power, but obligation. The blood of your ancestors flows in your veins. Constantine, Justinian, Basil the Bulgar Slayer. Today, their legacy ends with us. The stem. Ma is heavier than you expected. Its gold more substantial than its delicate appearance suggests. Pearls from Ceylon edge its base. Emeralds from Egypt stud its band. And at its peak rises the chiro, the sacred monogram that Constantine saw before his victorious battle at the Milvian Bridge. I've thought of sending you away, he continues, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. Ships wait in the harbor. Gold enough to buy safe passage to Italy, to Genoa where your Paleolog cousins might give sanctuary. The notion hangs between you like a proposed betrayal. Flight means survival, but survival without honor. To be the princess who fled while her father died, the heiress who chose life over legacy. History would remember such choices. And I've thought, he continues before you can respond, of the alternatives. The quick mercy of steel before dishonor. Or, his eyes meet yours, heavy with unasked permission. The or doesn't need elaboration. 3 choices lay before the last Byzantine princess. Flight, death by her own people's hands, or the tender mercies of Turkish captivity. In the latter case, beauty becomes one more weapon in a conqueror's arsenal, royal blood one more legitimizing factor for new dynasties. Father, you begin, but he stops you with a gesture. The choice, when the time comes, must be yours. I can't command this, shouldn't command it. Some decisions must come from the soul, not from imperial decree. You continue. The patriarch rises from his chair, moving with the careful precision of an old man whose bones remember age too keenly. In his hands he holds a chalice, not the ornate golden cup used in normal celebrations, but a simpler vessel of silver and wood. The wine within glows deep red, almost black in the chamber's lamplight. "If we are to meet our ends," he says, voice carrying a cross stone that has heard 1,000 years of prayer, "let us do so in communion with our Lord and with each other. Let us drink together, as Christ drank with his disciples before his own passion." This is not normal communion. There's no time for proper mass, no leisure for elaborate ritual. This is the essential sacrament stripped to its core: bread, wine, faith, and the community of those who share belief despite all evidence that such faith is futile. You kneel with the others on cold stone, your father beside you, the weight of empire in his posture. Lucas Notaras, whose family's naval skills couldn't prevent this moment. The archons, whose counsels couldn't find salvation in politics or war. Men whose names will die with them, whose purposes collapse into this single moment of choosing meaning over despair. The bread is ordinary, coarse barley stuff, nothing like the fine wafers used in more comfortable times. It tastes of ash and desperation, of dreams ground down by millstones that care nothing for human ambition. The wine burns slightly, its tartness mixing with the salt of tears you weren't aware of shedding. "Body of Christ," the patriarch intones over each communicant. "Blood of Christ." Simple words that have been spoken for 15 centuries, but today they carry the weight of ending. The last communion in the last Christian empire, shared by the last free Romans on earth. Rising from your knees feels like leaving something behind. Innocence, perhaps, or the luxury of believing that some things are permanent. You continue. A commotion in the corridor announces new arrivals. Guards admit 3 figures whose appearance transforms the chamber's atmosphere from grave to desperate. The first is Georgios Francis, your father's closest advisor, his usually immaculate robes torn and blood-soaked. Behind him stumble 2 soldiers, one supporting the other. Majesty, George Pants, dropping to one knee before your father. The land wall is breached. The great gate fallen. Turkish soldiers are in the outer city. The words hit like physical blows. Everyone knew this moment approached, but knowledge and reality proved different beasts. The outer city, where workshops produced the silks and gems that made Constantinople famous across the Mediterranean, where scholars preserved Greek learning through the dark centuries, where ordinary families lived lives made meaningful by small joys and daily faiths. Your father's face doesn't change expression, but his hands tighten on the edge of the map table. How long? Minutes, perhaps an hour if the inner defenses hold. They're cutting down everyone they find. Soldiers, civilians, it matters not. The streets run red from the Chrysias Gate to the Amastrionon. One of the supporting soldiers collapses completely, his strength finally failing. The spreading stain beneath him looks black in the lamplight. How many good men will water Constantinople's cobblestones before this day ends? The patriarch begins reciting prayers in rapid Greek, his words rattling like beads on a string. But even divine comfort struggles against such earthly realities. "Father," you say, surprising yourself with how steady your voice sounds. "What are your orders?" He looks at you with something approaching pride mixed with heartbreak. "We make our final stand. Not here in this chamber. That's mere hiding. But somewhere meaningful. Somewhere that speaks to what we were. You know, without being told, where he means. The Hagia Sophia, the great church that has defined the city's skyline for nearly 1,000 years. If the last emperor must fall, let it be before the altar of the church that embodies everything Byzantium meant. You continue. The journey to the Hagia Sophia becomes a pilgrimage through the endings of the world. Smoke fills the streets now, not the clean smoke of hearth fires, but the thick, choking cloud of a city beginning to burn. Turkish soldiers pour through the breached gate like a dark flood, their shouts echoing off ancient walls. Your father walks at the center of a small procession. The surviving archons flank him, their weapons drawn but held low. Behind come the palace guards, what remains of them, their purple cloaks torn and blood-soaked, but still bearing the double-headed eagle. You walk beside him, the weight of your armor nothing compared to the weight of the moment. Civilians join the procession as it winds through the streets. Some whisper prayers, others silently follow, drawn by the sight of their emperor walking openly toward whatever comes next. A woman presses a wilted flower into your palm, a simple gesture that carries the weight of farewell to everything beautiful in the world. The Turkish advance is visible now, smoke from burning houses, the gleam of steel catching sunlight, the sound of systematic destruction as a city dies. But between the outer wall and the Hagia Sophia lies a maze of narrow streets where defenders can still exact a price for every yard of ground. You pass the Triumphal Arch, where emperors once paraded after successful campaigns. Its marble surface bears carved scenes of victory over barbarians, images that seem bitterly ironic now. How many triumphant emperors passed beneath this stone, convinced their victories were permanent. Near the church rises a column topped with the statue of Constantine the Great. Even from ground level, you can see damage from Turkish cannon fire, chips and cracks that seem to map the empire's decline. Constantine looks eastward toward the rising sun, his bronze face perhaps the last to see the city whole and unconquered. You continue. The Hagia Sophia rises before you like a mountain of stone and faith. Its great dome, supported by half-domes and buttresses, seems to float above the burning city. Even damaged by siege, even scarred by 900 years of weather and war, it remains the most beautiful building on earth. The doors stand open, have stood open continuously for days as citizens sought sanctuary within its walls. Inside, thousands of people mass in prayer. Their voices blend into a sound like the sea, rising and falling in the ancient rhythms of Greek liturgy. Candles burn in every niche, their combined light creating a warm glow that pushes back the darkness of history. Your father pauses on the threshold, and you see him as he must see himself, the last in a line stretching back to Augustus Caesar, Diocletian, Constantine the Great. Behind him lies 1,000 years of Roman continuity. Ahead waits only the judgment of God and history. You enter together, and a hush falls over the crowd. The emperor has come to join them in this final hour, not hiding in the palace, not fleeing by ship, but standing with his people in the house of God. The silk of your purple garments whispers against stone that has heard the prayers of 40 generations. The interior takes your breath away, despite having seen it countless times. The dome soars overhead, its windows creating bands of light that shift as the sun moves through its arc. Mosaics cover every surface. Christ Pantocrator staring down from the highest points, the Virgin Mary holding the infant Christ, saints and emperors frozen in eternal prayer. Each face seems to watch your approach, the accumulated witness of the ages. Near the altar, a space has been kept clear. Your father kneels on the marble floor, his armor ringing against stone. You kneel beside him, feeling the chill seep through the padding of your knees. Around you, the surviving nobility follows suit, a field of purple and gold prostrate before the throne of heaven. The patriarch appears as if summoned, carrying the gospel book. His voice, when he begins to read, seems to come from the stones themselves. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. You continue. The reading continues, but your attention drifts to the details around you. An old woman clutches a baby to her chest, whispering lullabies in a voice cracked with fear. A merchant you recognize from the palace markets kneels beside a silk barrel, his trade goods now meaningless as currency. Two children, Too young to understand apocalypse, play quietly with carved wooden horses, toys that will outlast empires if God wills it. Outside, the sounds of battle draw closer. Clashing steel, shouting voices, the crash of doors being broken down. A Turkish victory cry lifts above the other noises, an ululating call that speaks of God's favor claimed by the conquerors. The defenders still fight, but their resistance fragments into individual stands rather than coordinated defense. Your father raises his head from prayer, listening. His fingers find the hilt of his sword, not drawing it, but checking its presence, confirming its readiness. In his eyes you see the terrifying clarity that comes when all illusions fall away. This is the moment he has prepared for since taking the crown, the final test of every lesson about duty, sacrifice, and the price of rule. They come, someone whispers unnecessarily. Everyone can hear it now, the sound of armed men approaching the church. Boots on marble, the rustle of mail, weapons being readied. The sanctuary has become a trap, but perhaps that was always the plan. Better to die with dignity in the house of God than to be hunted through the streets like an animal. The great doors shudder under impact. 1, 2, 3 blows of weapons or siege tools. On the 4th blow, the ancient wood splits. Light streams through the gap, not the clean light of heaven, but the red glare of a burning city. Turkish soldiers pour through the breach, their eyes adjusting to the church's dimmer light. For a moment, nobody moves. Conquerors and conquered stare at each other across a space that held the prayers of 1,000 years. You continue. Your father rises slowly, his armor catching the light of votive candles. The imperial regalia marks him clearly. Purple cloak, golden belt, the crown of Byzantium still on his brow. There's no point in hiding now the game has reached its end. He draws his sword, its steel whispering as it clears the scabbard. Around him, the surviving members of his guard do likewise. Perhaps 20 men against the flood of Turkish soldiers filling the doorway. Mathematics that even optimists can't make favorable. But this is no longer about winning. This is about how the last act plays out. What story future generations will tell about the moment when Eastern Rome finally fell. Constantine XI has chosen to meet his end not as a fleeing coward, but as a Roman emperor, sword in hand, facing his enemies, dying as he lived. You rise beside him, your own blade singing as it clears its sheath. The Turkish commander, a man whose rich clothes mark him as an important official, calls out in accented Greek, "Surrender yourselves." The Sultan offers mercy to those who yield. Your father's answer rings through the great church, echoing off dome and wall and mosaic. Never has a Roman emperor been taken alive by barbarians. Today will not break that tradition. The reply seems to satisfy something in the Turkish commander's soul. Perhaps he too understands the necessity of honorable endings, the weight that history places on final moments. He raises his own sword, curved Turkish steel against straight Roman iron, Islam against Christianity, the new world against the very old. The silence stretches for a heartbeat that lasts eternities. Then steel meets steel, and the final battle begins. You continue. Combat in the Hagia Sophia becomes something transcendent, a violent liturgy played out beneath the eyes of saints and angels. Swords ring against swords, their music mixing with the prayers of huddled civilians. Your blade meets Turkish steel, and sparks fly like offerings to violent gods. The man you face is skilled, perhaps a janissary officer or one of the Sultan's household troops. His scimitar moves in patterns that speak of decades spent perfecting the art of ending lives. But you have advantages he lacks. You know this space intimately, have walked these aisles since childhood. Your feet find sure footing while his slip on marble worn smooth by centuries of processions. Around you, the battle fragments into individual duels. Your father fights with the desperate strength of the doomed, his sword weaving patterns of steel that hold back enemies half his age. But the math remains inexorable. For every Turk who falls, 5 more press through the shattered doors. A scream cuts through the weapon song. Lucas Notaras staggers backward, clutching a wound that stains his purple robes deep crimson. His attacker presses forward, but a crossbow bolt sprouts from the Turk's chest, Flavius, appearing like an answer to unspoken prayers. The great dome echoes with sounds it was never meant to hear. But perhaps there's a terrible appropriateness. If the Eastern Roman Empire must end, let it end in the greatest achievement of Eastern Roman architecture, surrounded by the images of faith that sustained it through 15 centuries of glory and decline. Your opponent stumbles, opening his guard. Your sword takes him in the throat, and he falls against a pillar carved with vines and crosses. His blood mingles with older stains, wine from celebration, oil from consecration, now this final libation to the gods of war. You continue. The tide of battle moves like a slow tsunami, Turkish numbers finally overwhelming Roman skill and desperation. One by one, your defenders fall. The marble floor grows treacherous with blood, making every step a gamble with balance and life. Your father fights near the altar now, driven back, but not broken. The imperial crown still holds its place despite the violence swirling around it. In the candlelight, his armor seems to burn with inner fire, or perhaps that's just reflected flame from the city dying outside. You find yourself separated from him by a tide of struggling figures. Your own battles multiply, a janissary with murder in his eyes, an archer trying to draw close enough for certain aim, officers who see in your purple sash the promise of advancement and reward. Each fight weakens you further. Each victory costs more than the last. Maria appears impossibly beside you, clutching a long knife clearly taken from some kitchen. Her gentle hands, which dressed your hair this morning, now grip steel with desperate determination. Princess, she gasps, this way. I know a path. But paths lead only to different endings. The church has become a trap for all within its walls. Outside waits a city in flames, Turkish soldiers drunk on victory and blood. Inside waits the final confrontation between old faith and new force. Your father's voice rises above the chaos, speaking not to his enemies, but to heaven. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. The words of Christ from the cross, the words of martyrs through the ages, now the words of the last emperor of the East. A Turkish blade finds its mark. He staggers but doesn't fall, his hand pressed against a wound that blooms red across purple fabric. Still he fights, still he stands, held upright by will alone and the weight of 15 centuries. You continue. Through the melee, you fight toward your father. Turkish soldiers try to stop you, but desperation lends strength to your arm. Your sword opens a path written in steel and blood, each cut a prayer, each thrust a defiance of the inevitable. You reach him as he falls to one knee before the altar. 3 Turkish soldiers encircle him, their weapons raised for the killing blows. You arrive in time to take one in the back, your blade punching through mail and muscle to find his heart. He falls forward, surprise frozen on his features. The other 2 turn toward you, giving your father precious seconds to breathe. In his eyes you see something beyond pain or fear, a kind of peace, perhaps the satisfaction of duty completed. He has done what emperors must, faced the end with dignity, died with his sword in his hand, refused to cheapen his crown with cowardice. Anna, he whispers, using the last of his strength to speak. The blood continues. Remember what we were. The Turkish swords fall. You meet them with your shield, but the force drives you to your knees beside your father. His hand finds yours, not the emperor reaching for his subject, but a father touching his daughter one last time. The altar above you displays its ancient mosaics. Christ in glory, surrounded by saints and angels, his hands raised in eternal blessing. How many eyes have looked upon this image seeking comfort? How many souls have found peace beneath its painted gaze? Your father's eyes close. Constantine XI Paleologis, last emperor of Byzantium, last heir to Augustus Caesar and Constantine the Great, dies as he lived, holding the line against chaos, maintaining dignity in the face of darkness. The Turkish swords fall again, and this time your strength fails to stop them all. You continue. Pain flares along your sword arm, where Turkish steel found its mark. The weapon drops from nerveless fingers, clattering against marble that has seen the feet of 30 emperors. Your shield strap parts, the burden suddenly too much for wounded muscles to bear. The Turkish soldiers pause, perhaps recognizing the significance of the moment. They have killed an emperor, not captured, not negotiated with, but killed in honest battle. This will be a tale told around fires for generations, the day the last Caesar fell beneath Muslim swords. Blood runs from wounds you're only now beginning to feel. The immediate rush of battle is fading, replaced by the terrible clarity that comes before endings. Around you, the great church holds its breath, waiting to see how the last act plays out. A voice cuts through the silence. The Turkish commander who offered surrender so many minutes ago. Seize the princess. The Sultan will pay well for such a prize. The words galvanize you. Constantine's daughter, the last of the purple blood, a trophy for the victorious Sultan. You imagine the uses such a captive would serve. Political legitimacy through forced marriage, spiritual triumph through forced conversion, the simple satisfaction of breaking the proudest bloodline in Christendom. Your hand moves instinctively to the small knife at your belt, a lady's blade, meant for cutting meat at table, but sharp enough for other purposes. Some deaths come from the enemy's sword, others from the determination to choose one's own ending. The Turkish soldiers advance, their weapons lowered but ready. They want you alive, which gives certain advantages and certain terrible certainties. Behind them crowds more faces, janissaries, officers, common soldiers drawn by the promise of witness to historic moments. The knife feels light in your hand, lighter than crown or empire or the weight of blood that flows back to the foundation of cities. You continue. The blade trembles in your grip, not from fear, but from the magnitude of the choice. To die by your own hand means cheating the conquerors of their prize, maintaining the honor of a bloodline that has ruled for centuries. But it also means ending that bloodline forever, being the last speaker of a name that once made kingdoms tremble. Your father's hand lies still beside you, fingers loosened from the sword they gripped in life. On his ring finger gleams the great seal of empire, gold and amethyst carved with the double-headed eagle. 15 centuries of tradition rest in that simple band of metal and stone. The Turkish commander speaks again, this time in Arabic to his men. You catch scattered words: princess, valuable, careful. They understand the delicacy required. Dead emperors become martyrs, captured princesses become tools of legitimacy and conquest. Around the church's periphery, civilians watch in horrified fascination. Some still pray, their voices a whispered undertone to the immediate drama. Others simply stare, witnessing the moment when their world officially ends. Children who will grow up Turkish citizens watch the last Christian princess make her choice. The mosaics above seem to pulse with inner light, trick of exhaustion and blood loss, perhaps, but compelling nonetheless. Christ Pantocrator regards you with eyes that hold both judgment and compassion. The Virgin Mary cradles her child with eternal gentleness. Saints and martyrs who chose death before dishonor watch your struggle with understanding born of their own trials. Your grip tightens on the knife's handle. One quick thrust beneath the ribs, angled upward toward the heart. Your sword master taught you anatomy along with blade work, where to cut to incapacitate, where to strike to kill cleanly. A princess's education includes many subjects deemed inappropriate for lesser women. But another voice speaks, not in Arabic or Greek, but in the language of blood and bone and desperate hope. You continue. Princess, the call comes from the shadowed alcove near the altar, where Maria has somehow found concealment. Her eyes shine with tears and desperate purpose. Please, the children need you. The words hit like cold water, shocking you back from the edge of irrevocable decision. In the chaos and blood, you had forgotten the others. The citizens huddled in the church, the families pressed against walls, the babies too young to understand why the world has gone mad. What use is a dead princess to them? What service does a noble suicide perform for those who still must find ways to live under Turkish rule? Your death might preserve your personal honor, but theirs will be marked by compromises, survival, adaptation. The knife wavers in your grip. Around you, Turkish soldiers tighten their circle, perhaps sensing a change in your resolve. The commander raises his hand, whether in promise or threat, you cannot tell. Your father's blood soaks into the marble, joining stains left by other defenders. His sacrifice was necessary, right? The proper ending for the last emperor. But perhaps your survival serves a different purpose. Witness to what was lost, keeper of memories that should not die with the empire. The Turkish commander speaks in Greek, his accent thick but understandable. Princess, yield. Your blood need not water these stones. The Sultan values noble bloodlines, honors brave enemies. Live, and perhaps help your people find mercy in the new order. His words ring false in a dozen ways. The Sultan's mercy has particular definitions, and noble bloodlines often disappear mysteriously into harems or strangling cords. But they offer an alternative to the knife's quick ending, a gamble with uncertain odds but definite continuance. Maria inches closer, her simple dress torn and blood-stained, but her eyes bright with fierce determination. Behind her, you glimpse other faces, women, children, old men who survived the initial slaughter. They look to you not as an empress who can save them, but as a symbol that something precious might endure. You continue. The knife turns in your hand, its point now facing the nearest Turkish soldier. Not suicide. Then, if death comes, let it be from enemy steel rather than your own resolve. The choice shifts the balance of the moment, transforms you from potential victim to defiant prisoner. The Turkish commander's eyes widen slightly in respect. Perhaps he too understands the mathematics of honor, the calculus that balances personal death against dynastic survival. His sword lowers fractionally, not sheathed, but no longer poised for immediate use. I am Anna Paleologina, you say, your voice carrying across the silence. Daughter of Constantine, heir to Caesar, last of the purple blood. I choose to live, not for myself, but for the memory of what dies this day. The words feel like a physical weight lifting. Not the weight of fear that remains, will remain, but the crushing pressure of impossible decision. You will live, and in living, carry forward whatever can be salvaged from the wreck of empire. Turkish hands reach for you, surprisingly gentle. They strip away your weapons, but carefully, as if handling something precious. The knife joins your sword in enemy possession, but your defiance has purchased a different kind of respect. As they bind your hands with silk cords, silk, a small honor in captivity, you look back at your father's still form. Constantine XI lies where he fell, his crown askew but still upon his head. In death he looks younger, the weight of impossible choices lifted from features that had borne too much too long. Remember, you whisper, knowing Maria will hear, knowing the words will somehow find their way to those who need them. Remember what we were. Remember why it mattered. The Hagia Sophia, oldest church in the city, witnesses your words and files them away with all the other prayers and promises it has heard. Its stones will outlast empires. Its beauty survived the transition from one faith to another. But today marks an ending that no architecture can forestall. You continue. Led from the Hagia Sophia, You see Constantinople with different eyes. No longer your city, no longer your responsibility, but still achingly familiar. The smoke that seemed like apocalypse this morning now appears as mere change, violent transition from one world to another. Turkish soldiers fill the streets, but their fury has largely passed. The systematic sack continues, valuable objects claimed for the Sultan, useful buildings marked for preservation, symbols of the old order defaced or destroyed methodically. But the initial bloodlust has cooled into professional occupation. You pass the palace where this day began. Its windows stare dark and broken, purple banners replaced with Ottoman crescents. In the courtyard where you trained with swords, Turkish engineers examine siege weapons with professional interest. The personal and political collapse into simple historical process. The harbor comes into view, crowded with Turkish ships. Galleys that brought the armies now prepare to carry away the treasures. Gold, silver, books, artwork, 15 centuries of accumulated beauty flowing outward to other capitals, other treasuries. Your city becomes a source of export rather than a destination for pilgrims. A tent has been erected near the water, rich silk in green and gold, guarded by janissaries in tall white caps. This is where you are brought, where decisions about your future will be made by men who reckon empires like merchants counting profits and losses. Before entering, you turn for one last look at the city of your birth. The sun hangs low now, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Smoke still rises from some quarters, but already the essential work of survival has begun. People emerge from hiding places, merchants evaluate what remains of their stock, children play among ruins with the adaptability that keeps humanity alive through any apocalypse. Constantinople endures, will endure, though wearing new names and serving new masters. But the world that shaped you, the civilization that defined you, the empire that gave meaning to your blood, that world ends with today's sunset. You continue. Inside the command tent, the world transforms. Rich carpets cover the ground, their patterns speaking of Persia and distant kingdoms. Oil lamps cast warm light over low tables laden with maps, dispatches, the administrative detritus of conquest. The air smells of rose water and mint tea, a stark contrast to the smoke and blood outside. The Sultan sits on a simple chair, beautiful in its understatement, inlaid with mother of pearl and ivory, but still just a chair rather than a throne. This is Mem II, 21 years old, conqueror of Constantinople, new master of the trade routes between Europe and Asia. His eyes, when they fix on you, hold intelligence sharpened by ambition realized. He is younger than you expected, his beard still soft with youth. But his presence fills the tent, not with the weight of ceremonies or the pomp of established power, but with the electric tension of history in motion. This is the man who succeeded where his father failed, who turned centuries of dreams into morning's reality. The last princess of Byzantium, he says in accented Greek. His voice carries curiosity more than cruelty. You chose to surrender rather than die. An interesting decision for one whose bloodline values honor above life. The words carry challenge, but not immediate threat. This is negotiation, not interrogation. You are valuable, as symbol, as legitimacy, as bridge between the old world and new. How you are used depends partly on how you present yourself. I chose to serve the living rather than satisfy the dead, you reply. The words sound stronger than you feel, but voice control comes with royal training. The dead have had their honor. The living need hope. He nods slowly, perhaps recognizing the political wisdom beneath personal courage. Around the tent, his advisors listen without appearing to. Men who understand that prizes of war require careful handling lest they become sources of future rebellion. You continue. The Sultan gestures to a low divan covered in silk cushions. The fabric is exquisite, probably woven in the workshops you once visited, irony wrapped in beauty. You sit carefully, aware that your every gesture is being evaluated, cataloged, fitted into larger plans. Your father died well, the Sultan continues. This is grace note, honoring the defeated enemy, acknowledging courage even in conquest. He could have fled by ship, sought refuge in Genoa or Venice. Instead, he chose the warrior's ending. This speaks well of your bloodline. The compliment cuts both ways. Brave blood is valuable, but it also dangerous. Less likely to accept subjugation quietly, more prone to inspiring resistance in others. You represent both asset and threat, depending on how you are utilized. A servant appears with refreshment, tea in small glasses, honeyed pastries, dried fruits, and nuts. The gesture extends hospitality even as it emphasizes your changed circumstances. You are guest, prisoner, prize. The categories blur in the careful dance of conquerors and conquered. You accept the tea gratefully, realizing you haven't eaten since morning. The liquid is hot, sweet, containing spices that must have traveled the same trade routes you once taxed. Now those routes run to Ottoman treasuries, their profits serving different masters. What becomes of me? You ask directly. Oblique conversation serves little purpose when tomorrow holds such uncertainty. The Sultan sips his own tea thoughtfully. That depends on many things. Your conduct, the stability of our new possessions, the needs of statecraft. His eyes study you over the glass's rim. Tell me, what did you study in your father's court? What skills might prove useful in a changed world? The question reveals more than its face value suggests. Useful princesses live decorative ones often face unfortunate accidents. You continue. I speak several languages. You answer, matching his evaluating tone. Greek, Latin, some Arabic, enough Italian for trade negotiations. I can read and write in all of them. My education included statecraft, mathematics, geography, astronomy. Each skill is weighed carefully. Multilingual nobles ease the process of administration in diverse empires. Literacy enables useful service in bureaucracies that rule through written law. Knowledge of stars and numbers suggests the practical intelligence that turns theory into effective governance. I also studied music, you continue, both performance and composition. And the textile arts, silk work, embroidery, dyeing. This seems less immediately relevant, but the Sultan notes it nonetheless. Cultural accomplishments smooth diplomatic marriages, make prisoners into wives who can bear children trained in both traditions. The enumeration feels surreal, reducing a lifetime of learning to a merchant's inventory, your identity to useful commodities in the marketplace of conquest. But survival often requires such reductions, such willingness to be valued for what you offer rather than who you are. Interesting, the Sultan muses. And your Christian faith? How firmly does it anchor your soul? The question carries obvious dangers. Too firm, and you become a martyr problem requiring permanent solution. Too flexible, and you lose the very legitimacy that makes you valuable as a bridge between faiths and peoples. I believe in the God who watches all empires rise and fall. You answer carefully. Whose mercy extends to all peoples, though they call him by different names and serve him through different prayers. Not quite apostasy, not quite orthodoxy. A formulation that could satisfy multiple interpretations as needed. The Sultan's slight smile suggests he appreciates the diplomatic careful. Around you, the tent's occupants continue their business, reading dispatches, updating maps, managing the thousand details that turn military conquest into administrative reality. The immediate crisis passes, now comes the harder work of building something lasting from the ruins of the old. You continue. Night approaches, painting the tent's silk walls in deeper hues. Outside, the sounds of conquest evolve, less clashing steel, more creaking wheels as treasure carts move toward the harbor. The city adjusts to its new reality with the resilience that has kept Constantinople alive through invasions, plagues, famines, theological disputes, and economic disasters. The Sultan rises, pacing to a table covered with maps. These show not just Constantinople, but regions far beyond: the Hungarian frontier, the Italian peninsula, the coast of North Africa. One conquest feeds dreams of the next. Even today's triumph is just a step in larger plans. I offer you a choice, he says finally. Not the choice your father faced, but a different gamble with uncertain odds. You wait, knowing that patience is often wisdom when dealing with power that could snuff you as easily as thinking. You may be kept in honored captivity, treated well but closely watched. A living symbol of conquest, valuable for display but carefully contained. Or, he turns back toward you, his expression unreadable. You may serve, actively, in my court, with my administrators, helping to bridge the gap between old and new orders. The distinction matters profoundly. Captivity means survival but irrelevance, a golden cage that preserves life while draining it of meaning. Service implies collaboration, compromise, the gradual erosion of identity in exchange for influence and purpose. What manner of service? You ask. The conquered must be administered, their customs understood, their leaders identified and either eliminated or co-opted. Your knowledge of this city, these people, their fears and loyalties, all valuable in building lasting rule rather than mere occupation. The offer hangs in the scented air like a sword balanced on its point. To help administer the conquest means betraying those you once served. To refuse might mean death, but certainly means meaninglessness. You continue. The tent falls silent except for the soft rustle of silk moved by evening breezes. Outside, Constantinople settles into its first night under Ottoman rule, a city learning new rhythms, new authorities, new ways of navigating between survival and surrender. The Sultan waits for your answer, but his patience carries undertones. This is not a negotiation between equals, but a conqueror's offer to valuable property. You may choose the terms of your use, but not your utility. What assurance do I have, you ask carefully, that service will be rewarded rather than punished? That helping to build something new won't simply make me more expendable once the building is complete? A fair question, and as not acknowledges its legitimacy. None but my word and the logic of statecraft. Dead princesses provide no counsel. Eliminated administrators leave gaps in governance. Value maintained is value multiplied. The philosophy rings true. Sultans who casually destroy useful tools soon find themselves lacking instruments for complex tasks. But exceptions occur when politics demand them, when symbolic value outweighs practical utility. You think of your father, dead now several hours, his crown growing cold on his head. He chose honor over everything else, meeting death with dignity rather than compromise. But he also left behind a city, a people, a civilization that must find ways to persist under new banners. What would he want of you? What would your mother counsel, she who held mountain passes against impossible odds not for glory, but for the sake of those behind the walls? The answer comes not from their memories, but from your own conviction, formed through this longest day of your life. I will serve, you say finally. Not Constantinople as it was. That city died today. But the people who remain, who must find their way in the world you're building. For their sake, I will help you understand what you have conquered. The Sultan smiles, not triumph, but satisfaction. One more piece falls into place on the great board where empires play their games. You continue. With your decision made, the formal arrangements begin. A scribe appears with parchment and ink, ready to record the new order's first accords with the old blood. Documents that will legitimize your service, codify your status, create legal frameworks for cooperation between conqueror and conquered. But first, the immediate practicalities. Living quarters suitable for your revised station, not a dungeon, not a palace, but something between. Guards who serve as protection and supervision simultaneously. clothes befitting your new role without the purple that proclaimed old allegiances too boldly. You may send word to those you trust, the Sultan tells you. Let them know of your status, your safety. Some may choose to follow you into this new service. Others will prefer different paths. Maria immediately comes to mind. Faithful Maria who followed even the final battle, who risked everything for loyalty that transcended politics. If she will come, her presence would ease the transition from princess to administrator, from sovereign to subject. The Sultan hands you a signet ring, not his own seal, but one designed for your use. Bronze rather than gold, decorated with intertwined patterns that could be read as Islamic or Christian depending on the viewer's perspective. A tool for your new work, marking documents that will bridge old and new authority. Tomorrow, after the city has had time to settle, we begin properly, he continues. Tonight, rest. Recovery. The morning will bring work enough for many tomorrows. Guards escort you from the tent as full darkness falls. The city shows scattered lights now. Turkish cooking fires, Christian prayer candles, the simple necessity of seeing in dark spaces. Life continues even as worlds end and begin. The quarters assigned to you are modest but comfortable, a room in what was once a merchant's house near the harbor. Through the window, you can see ships preparing to sail, their holds full of Byzantine treasures heading for Ottoman capitals. You continue. Alone for the first time in this endless day, you allow yourself to truly feel what has passed. The weight hits all at once. Your father's death, the empire's fall, your own capitulation to enemy service. You sink onto the narrow bed, and for a moment, the carefully maintained control cracks. But not completely. Even now, tears seem a luxury you cannot afford. Tomorrow demands strength, demands the ability to navigate between two worlds while belonging fully to neither. Tonight is for gathering that strength, for deciding who you will become in this strange new existence. A knock comes at the door. Maria enters, somehow having negotiated her way through Turkish guards and bureaucracy. Her eyes are red-rimmed but purposeful, her simple clothes torn but clean. She carries a bundle, your remaining personal possessions salvaged from the palace. Princess, she begins, and stops. What should I call you now? The question strikes to the heart of your new reality. Princess implies sovereignty that no longer exists. Anna suggests familiarity inappropriate for your official role. Some new designation must emerge to navigate the changed landscape. Anna will suffice, you decide. Anna Paleologina when formality requires. But to you, to those I trust, simply Anna. She nods, unpacking the bundle. A change of clothes, your prayer book, a few pieces of jewelry too precious to abandon, but not valuable enough to attract thieves. At the bottom, carefully wrapped, lies the locket the patriarch gave you, the one containing a fragment of the true cross. The city changes even as we speak, Maria reports quietly. Turkish families move into the empty houses. Shops reopen under new ownership. The Hagia Sophia. She pauses. They've hung crescents from the dome, but the mosaics remain. The image crystallizes your new reality. Surface changes serving power, deeper structures enduring through transition. Perhaps this describes your own transformation, new loyalties for survival, old values preserved beneath. You continue. As night deepens, you think of all those who won't see another dawn. Your father, certainly, but also countless others whose names history won't record. The young soldier from Trebizond, whose family fed the vultures. The crossbowman whose weapon bore scars from a dozen sieges. The imam whose prayers ended in Byzantine blood. Each death was individual, personal, irreplaceable to someone. But they aggregate into statistics, into the mathematics by which empires change hands. How many souls purchase each shift in sovereignty? How many personal tragedies accumulate into historical transition? You open your prayer book, finding familiar comfort in words that transcend political boundaries. The prayers are Greek, but God presumably understands all languages. Perhaps Turkish prayers rise alongside yours, thanking the same divine power for victory rather than begging for deliverance. Maria sits nearby, mending tears in your clothes. Her needle flashes in the candlelight, weaving repair into damage. It seems a suitable metaphor for the coming years, constant work to patch and heal, to make serviceable what has been broken. What will you do? You ask her. Stay with you, if you'll have me. My place is where it's always been, beside the daughter of my blood-sworn house. Her loyalty spans the death of empires, rooted in something deeper than politics or expedience. Outside, the sounds of occupation continue. Horses in the streets, foreign voices calling orders, the creak of carts carrying plunder. But underneath, softer noises, a baby crying, someone singing a children's song, the ordinary sounds of life persisting through extraordinary circumstances. Tomorrow you begin the delicate work of serving both the new order and the needs of your people. It will require compromises that would horrify yesterday's princess, but seem necessary to today's survivor. Each decision will carry the weight of betrayal or necessity, depending on perspective. You continue. Maria finishes her mending and helps you prepare for sleep. The routine is familiar despite the foreign surroundings. Hair braided back, jewelry carefully stored, prayers whispered in private moments. Some rituals transcend empires, bridging old world and new through the simple necessity of human habit. As you lie in the narrow bed, you inventory what remains. Your body, wounded but functional. Your mind, trained in languages and statecraft that may prove valuable to new masters. Your soul, battered but not broken, carrying forward the memories of what was lost. The immediate questions are clear: how to serve without betraying, how to help your people without becoming merely a tool of their oppression, how to maintain some core of yourself while adapting to roles you never thought to play. But beneath these practical concerns lies a deeper uncertainty. What happens to identity when the world that shaped it vanishes? Can someone raised to rule learn to serve? Can faith survive such tests, or must it transform into something unrecognizable? You drift toward sleep thinking of your father's face in those final moments. Not the pain or fear, but the peace she seemed to find in choosing his ending. Perhaps that kind of grace comes only to those who have power to choose death. For the living, grace must be found in smaller victories, surviving with dignity, serving with purpose, carrying forward what deserves preservation. The candle gutters low, wax pooling on the simple wooden table. Outside, Constantinople sleeps its first night as an Ottoman city. Within this room, the last Byzantine princess dreams of worlds that were and worlds that might be. You continue. Sleep comes fitfully, broken by sounds from the street and the weight of the day's events. In the moments between waking and dreams, memory and reality blur. You are simultaneously the 8-year-old girl learning court etiquette, the warrior princess on the walls, and the negotiating prisoner in the Sultan's tent. Dreams, when they come, are vivid beyond reason. You stand again in the Hagia Sophia, but it is empty, silent, waiting. Mosaics move on the walls, Christ blessing crowds that shift between Christian robes and Turkish garments. The dome opens to reveal stars arranged in patterns you almost recognize, almost understand. Your father appears, whole and unbloodied, wearing the crown that now lies with his corpse. He speaks, but you cannot hear the words over the sound of distant drums. When you strain to listen, the dream fragments like glass, leaving you awake and grasping for meaning that dissolves before it can be captured. Maria sleeps soundly on a pallet nearby, her face peaceful in the way that speaks of exhaustion overcome by relief. She at least knows her place in this new order. Where you go, she will follow. Simple loyalty undisturbed by questions of collaboration or compromise. You rise quietly, moving to the window. The city extends before you under starlight, familiar streets now serving unfamiliar purposes. Here, where you played as a child. There, where you attended your first state banquet. Beyond, the walls where you faced your first genuine combat. All transformed, all carrying forward some essence of what they were while becoming something entirely different. The moon hangs over the Bosphorus, its light painting the water silver. That same moon shone on Constantine the Great when he founded this city, on Justinian when he built the Great Dome, on Basil when he broke the Bulgarian threat. Now it illuminates the beginning of something new, something that will outlast you as surely as the empire outlasted its founders. You continue. A sound draws your attention, not from the street, but from within the room. Maria stirs in her sleep, murmuring words you can't quite catch. Her dreams, you suspect, hold fewer philosophical complexities. They probably feature familiar faces, comfortable routines, the prospect of serving in known ways even if circumstances have changed. You envy her that simplicity while recognizing that your own burdens come with your station. Royal blood carries obligations that persist beyond the death of kingdoms. The last daughter of a dying line cannot simply disappear into comfortable anonymity. She must find ways to honor the past while building futures that have room for more than mere survival. A plan begins forming, not fully developed, but substantial enough to shape your dreams. The Sultan spoke of administering a conquered city, of bridging two worlds. But what if that bridge carried traffic both ways? What if service to new masters included subtle preservation of old values? What if collaboration contained within it the seeds of cultural continuity? You think of books, Greek manuscripts that could be translated rather than burned, preserving classical learning in new forms. Of skills, Byzantine craftsmen whose techniques could be taught to Turkish apprentices, keeping alive arts that would otherwise vanish. Of people, families who might find protection under your new influence, children who could learn their history even as they adapt to new realities. The work would be delicate, dangerous, requiring absolute discretion. Too obvious, and you'd face charges of sedition. Too subtle, and the preservation would fail, leaving only the collaboration without its justifying purpose. But perhaps, in the spaces between pure betrayal and meaningless resistance, some third path waited. You returned to bed with these thoughts circling like prayers. Tomorrow would test their feasibility against the hard realities of conquest and governance. Tonight, they were simply hopes cradled in a room between two worlds, held by a princess learning to become something both less and more than what she'd been. You continue. Sleep finally takes hold, carrying you into deeper waters where past and future blur like watercolors in rain. In your dreams, you are many people simultaneously. The princess who woke this morning in silk and safety, the warrior who stood on burning walls, the negotiator who chose service over death. The city dreams too, its consciousness shifting like a tide. Ottoman prayers mix with Orthodox vespers. Turkish lullabies blend with Greek cradle songs. Commerce flows in new channels while water still runs through ancient cisterns. The essential structures remain while the superficial forms transform, a metamorphosis that might serve as template for your own evolution. In the deepest part of night, when the boundary between sleeping and waking grows thinnest, you see your father one last time. He stands not in armor, but in the simple robes of a monk, and his face holds the peace of man who has found his ending and can rest in its completion. Behind him, figures emerge from shadow, all the emperors who came before, stretching back through centuries of sovereignty. They don't speak, but their message is clear. The crown may have passed to other heads, but the responsibility continues. Not to restore what was lost. That path leads only to futile rebellion and unnecessary death. but to ensure that something of value survives the transition, that the best of what they built lives on in new forms under different banners. The dream fades as dawn approaches, leaving you with a clarity that feels like commission. Today begins your real work, not the desperate defense of walls and traditions that can't be held, but the more subtle task of preserving what deserves to continue through patient service rather than glorious resistance. You continue. You wake before full dawn, the habit of royal schedules persisting beyond their necessity. Through the window, the eastern sky shows the first blush of light over waters that have welcomed sunrise for 1,000 years. The city stirs with different rhythms now, Islamic calls to prayer mixing with the ordinary sounds of a port awakening to commerce. Maria is already moving about quietly, preparing clothes and morning rituals. She's found ways to heat water, to arrange your hair in styles suitable for your new position. The familiar routine anchors this moment of transition, making the impossible somehow manageable. As you dress, you notice she's laid out the least ornate of your remaining garments. Good enough to maintain dignity, simple enough to avoid provocative display of wealth. The choices themselves represent your new reality, always walking lines between too much and too little, between maintaining identity and accepting transformation. A servant appears, Turkish, polite, carrying an invitation to break fast with the Sultan's administrators. The real work begins now, the careful navigation of new loyalties and old responsibilities. As you prepare to leave this room that marks the border between your old life and whatever comes next, you touch the locket at your throat. The fragment of the true cross rests against your heart, invisible beneath practical clothes, but present nonetheless. Some things transcend the rise and fall of empires, surviving in hidden places until their open season returns. Today you begin learning which parts of your heritage can be preserved in the shadows and which must be carried forward in new forms under different names. The door opens onto morning light and the rest of your life. Behind you, the room holds the clothes and tears and dreams of your last night as solely a daughter of Byzantium. Ahead wait the uncertainties and possibilities of serving as a bridge between worlds that must somehow learn to coexist. You continue. Historical records suggest that Anna Paleologina, last princess of Byzantium, lived for nearly 50 years after Constantinople's fall. She served in various administrative capacities within the Ottoman court, helping manage the transition of the conquered city while secretly maintaining Greek Orthodox traditions within her household. She never married, dedicating herself instead to the preservation of Byzantine culture through patient, hidden work. Under her influence, many Greek scholars found positions as tutors and translators. Classical texts were copied in Arabic script but Greek language, preserving them when the originals might have been destroyed. Christian families received protection through her subtle interventions. The Hagia Sophia became a mosque, but retained many of its mosaics, some say through her quiet advocacy. The city's Greek population faced many hardships, but survived as a community, aided by networks she carefully cultivated. She established schools where Greek children learned their letters alongside Turkish ones, ensuring cultural continuity through education rather than rebellion. When she died in 1501, Istanbul as the city was now known mourned quietly. Her funeral drew both Christians and Muslims who had benefited from her diplomatic service. She was buried near the city walls she had once defended, her grave marked with stones that bore no inscription, fitting for a woman whose greatest achievements were necessarily hidden from history's usual accounts. But in the neighborhoods where Greek was still spoken, in the workshops where Byzantine crafts persisted, in the libraries where copied manuscripts preserved ancient wisdom, her legacy lived on. The last princess had found a final victory in defeat, discovering that some battles are won not through resistance, but through the patient work of preservation across generations. The purple died with her father that day in the Hagia Sophia. but the ideas it represented, the belief that beauty, learning, and faith could outlast empires, survived in forms both changed and changeless, like the city itself. Constantinople fell, but something essential of Byzantium endured, carried forward by those who learned that survival sometimes requires the most difficult compromise of all, choosing adaptation over glory, believing that the future holds space for past dreams transformed rather than preserved unchanged. The last day ended, but the story, in countless individual lives and choices, continued.